Hello, I am Major Christina Rusnock, and this is the first lecture in a multi-part series of design lectures. The purpose of this series is to give you more exposure to design than you're getting through the other textbook that we're using in class. So this is a supplement to that textbook, since that textbook really doesn't contain as much design material as I would like. For this particular set of lectures, I'm going to be using Steve Krug's Don't Make Me Think, Revisited. This book is a common sense approach to web and mobile usability, and while it's specifically geared towards web design, I think many of these principles are applicable to all human-computer interactions. So as I said, the material in this book doesn't really follow along with your primary text, and so I'm not going to include these lectures in any way that's synced with the other items in the textbook. Instead, I'll go ahead and list these separately, and it is your option if you would like to watch all these lectures as you go along through the text, or if you want to wait until later in the course to watch them. So your weekly assignments are really focused on the textbook material, but the final exam is going to take a little bit more of a design focus, where you're going to synthesize all of these evaluations you've been doing along the way and do a little bit of design. And so I expect that for that final exam, you're going to be pulling from the material that's in this set of lectures, in addition to the material that you've been generating through your evaluations. All right, so the first chapter in Don't Make Me Think is also titled Don't Make Me Think. So the material covered in this chapter is Krug's first law of usability, which is Don't Make Me Think. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about what are the things that make us think when we look at a website, what are those items that cause us to have clarity, and what are those items that really cause us to puzzle over, and to make sure that we understand what we're doing in our designs that might be adding to the cognitive resources and the cognitive load of your users. We're also then going to look at what kind of things can we do to prevent users from having to think unnecessarily. So if you want to make your website, your app, or your product easy to use, what's the most important thing you can do? Don't make the users think. And what that means is that the website or product should be ideally self-evident, right? They should be able to look at the item, and it should be very clear in and of itself what that item is for and what it can do. Right, so the content and the presentation should cause that item to be obvious. And where we can't make it self-evident, we then look to make it self-explanatory. And we'll go into that, both self-evident and self-explanatory, a little bit more in depth in the rest of this presentation. So how do you know if you've created a product or a website that's self-evident? You should be able to show it to someone who knows nothing about it, and they should be able to look at it and say, oh, it's a blank, right? So, oh, it's a website for selling used cars. Oh, it's a website for buying clothes, right? So they should be able to look at it and they know exactly what it's for. The whole site in general, which is what you're hoping to get out of the homepage, and specific areas of the site, right? Oh, it's the shopping cart, right? So they should be able to look at specific buttons, specific links, and know what they're going to do and where it's going to take them. So I'm going to give you some examples so you can kind of get a feel for how self-evident an item should be. Right, so taking a look at this, you might have a couple ideas of what this might be. Right. This item here is also the same item as the previous. So is this. Maybe you're starting to see some holes and you're starting to get an idea of what these items might be. All right, so all of these items are salt and pepper shakers, and you can see as you look across these items, some of them are more self-evident than others as to what they are. One of the things that you can kind of think about is not only would you know that these are containers for salt and pepper, but would you know which one is the salt and which one is the pepper? Right, so some of those may not be as clear as others. Perhaps we have some clues, like we're more likely to have more holes for the pepper, I do believe. So I believe this one would be the pepper shaker. But I'm not 100% certain actually on that. And I think most users may or may not be 100% certain. All right, so out of products and into websites, how do we know that our website is self-evident? Right? Well, you know that when the user goes to the site and they make confirmatory statements. If you're doing a think aloud, they should be saying these confirmatory statements out loud. But if they're not, then they should at least be thinking these in their heads. They should look at the site and say, okay, there's the blank. And oh, over there, there's a blank. And this is the thing that I want, and it's right here. And when they're going through, it's all confirmatory. I see this, and I see this, and I see this. What you don't want the user to think or to say aloud in their think aloud is puzzled questions, like, where am I? That's especially common if they get to the website from another page and it doesn't link them directly to the home page, right? So do they end up in the middle of your site? Do they know where they are, or do they feel lost, right? Where do I begin? If you've got a lot of different things on the site, they may be kind of confused about what item am I supposed to click on first? They may think they're supposed to be doing a linear process, but they can't seem to figure out where that process starts, right? They might see a word that doesn't really make sense to them, and they might be like, why do they call it that? What does that mean, right? They might see an item and they wonder, can I click on that? Is that a button? Is that a link? Or is that just a picture? Right? I say, is that the navigation? Or is that area over there the navigation? Right? So they're having trouble figuring out how to navigate the site. Right? They may see two links or a button and a link, and to them, because of the verbiage on them, they may say, are these the same thing? Are they going to both take me to the same next page, or are they actually two different things that are going to take me different places? That's particularly troublesome because then they're already thinking that, okay, I've got a 50-50 chance of getting it wrong and picking the wrong one. Right? Is that an ad or is it part of the site? Right. So a lot of times if we see images and whatnot, it's not clear to us whether or not this is something that's part of the site that the site intended us to have, or if this is actually if we click on it, it's going to take us somewhere else, to somewhere completely different. So here's an example. I think it's an example of a pretty clear website. Right? So you go to it and you say, okay, open table, that's the name of the site. Make restaurant reservations the easy way. Okay, it's a site for making restaurant reservations. 2 people, oh look, there's a drop down. Okay, this is where I set the number of people I want in my reservation. Here's where I set the date. Here's where I set the time. And oh look, I can see what kind of cuisine, if I want Chinese or if I know the particular restaurant name. All right, and then I click find a table. Okay, I see up here, this is how I sign up. And oh look, okay, there's some featured areas that have cities, looks like I have a bunch of restaurants that are in those cities. Right, so they walk around this particular site and they can move around it in any order, and it's pretty clear, this is this, and this is this, and this is this. Right, nice self-evident site. And here's another one of my favorite sites, not because of its design, but because I use the content on it. Board Game Geek. Not the clearest site. They do follow the custom of putting their logo up here in the upper left-hand corner. However, because of the way it's visually designed, it's hard to tell if this is actually part of the site or if this is another one of these little banners that they've got going on all around surrounding the whole site, and it's not clear if these banners are part of the site or these are advertisements. This one says pre-order, so that might be an advertisement. This is now available. That sounds like it maybe, but maybe the site's selling these things. It's not very clear, right? You look around, you try to say, where's the navigation? There's these links off on the left. Usually that means navigation. But then up at the top, there's these items that kind of look like they might be tabs. This one looks, because it's blue, looks like it might be a tab. And then there's these drop downs down here. So we've got a bunch of different places where we're like, I'm not too sure where the main navigation is on this site. And of course, all of these little banners, we don't actually know if they're supposed to be just visually pretty graphics or if they actually are clickable items. And then of course there's this whole middle section it's almost just covered in links and lots of text, and you see lots of crazy things going on. And so it's actually a very overwhelming site to come to for the first time. and you're really not clear where you're supposed to begin or what you're supposed to do, or even what this site is really all about. If you read enough of these names, you might see certain keywords. You see lots of contests. So you might think this is a website for contests. There's some games and tournaments, more game roundups. Still not quite clear what this site's really all about. And maybe it's not clear that this is a place that you can find information about board games, like a Wikipedia for board games, plus it's a place where you can buy and sell board games and everything board games. It's probably not quite clear that that's really what this is all about. All right, so there are a couple of things that make us think. The first one is names, right? So you can make the names clear by making them obvious. So name them what they are. What you don't want to do is make names that are cute or clever, company specific, or technical, right? Because you want to be able to reach a wide audience. And when you fall into those traps, you end up creating names of items, links, navigation that causes the user to be confused about whether or not that's really the item they want to click on, whether or not that's really the place they want to go. So it really should be obvious to the user. If they're looking for a shopping cart, you probably want to call it shopping cart, or at least cart, right? Name it what it's called. That really makes everything clear to the user. All right, so here's some example of names that are perhaps a little puzzling. You probably recognize this site. Over here on the left-hand side, there's a link that's called My Stuff. And, it's actually not clear whether or not this is an item that's relevant to you and whether or not all your stuff is actually going to be in here. Especially if you look down here and you see these things. Well, awards, decorations, duty, history, career data brief, aren't these things my stuff too? Right, so it's not actually clear what I'm going to find when I enter that area. All right, over here on the right-hand side, we've got a glossary, known problems, and case management system. I have no idea what the case management system is. And in the context of this site, I actually don't know what the glossary or the known problems would be either. So even though I've been in the Air Force for over 10 years, it's not clear to me why this website needs to have a glossary. And if known problems is just technical issues on the website, that seems kind of strange that you would have so many technical issues that you need to have a whole page listing them. Right, and then we can come down here. There's this red address country errors. I don't really know what that's all about either. Maybe some of you do, but there's a lot of things on here that, and maybe this is a system announcement, so maybe that's not always there. Right, but there's a number of links. At least you know they're links because they're in blue and they're underlined. Except for this pop-up blocker notice, it's not blue for some reason. But still, the naming on these, very confusing. All right, another example. This is Blackboard. This is my homepage when I first log in. And when I come down here and I look in these tools, I see these goals. I know what a goal is, but in the context of Blackboard, I have no idea. Browse NBC Learn. Unless the NBC is the National Broadcasting Company, I don't really know how that connects to Blackboard. Don't know what Blackboard Sync is. Got this NBC Learn playlist, got that again. And then academic materials, that's very general, especially considering that this isn't inside a course, but it's at the upper level. Right, so we've got these names that are broad, ambiguous. They use company-specific, perhaps, acronyms and meanings. And those are the things you want to try to stay away from. All right, here's a site that's got some pretty self-evident names. Hotels, flights, vacation rentals, restaurants. Right? As you go through this particular site and you look at the words on it, it's very clear what those words mean and what kind of items you're going to find when you click on those particular sections. All right, so names, that's the first thing you should pay attention to. The next thing that makes us think is interaction items. Your links, your buttons. It should be obvious that the user can click on it, right? So names should be self-evident. The interaction items should be obvious that they are, in fact, interaction items. The user should not have to spend cognitive resources trying to figure out whether or not this is an item they can click on. Right, so I'm giving you some examples here in the middle. This is clearly a button. Right? It's obviously the design, the way that we've outlined it here with the rounded corners. We've given you some signifiers, going back to your Norman's design of everyday things, right? So you have some signifiers here. This one here, not quite as clear. It looks like it's bold, so it probably would stand out against the rest of the text, and it is blue, which is often used for link colors, although it's not underlined. So it's not clear necessarily. You might have a few milliseconds that you spend trying to decide, and you might just end up just clicking on it just to see what happens. And then you've got something like this on the very right, where it's just bolded, not much differentiation between it and normal text. And this would be very hard. You might spend a lot of time trying to decide if this is something to click on. In fact, you may just overlook it completely and not believe that it's something that you can click on. So with your interaction items, the user can always click on them to figure them out. Right? So it's pretty easy for them to test whether or not it's a button, but they shouldn't have to. Right? It's distracting for the user, and it wastes their time, and it's actually annoying. Right? I shouldn't have to waste brain cells trying to figure out what I need to click on. I should be able to just click on it. And the biggest issue is that it erodes confidence in the site. So if you don't take the time to design your site with the appropriate signifiers, it gives an image for your company and for your product. And it erodes their confidence not only in the site's design, but also in the site's content. All right, if you can't figure out how to get a button correct, how do I know that you can do my online banking correct? So I'm going to give you an example here of just one that's a little bit confusing. There's so many issues with this, I don't know where to start. The first one is actually just trying to figure out what is and is not clickable. So if you look at this set of links here in the center, these are in fact clickable links. They're blue and they're underlined, which follows a typical web convention. However, you go to this item right here, this one is also actually dark blue. It's not as light as this one. It's blue as well and it's underlined. This is not clickable. Despite the fact that it's underlined, this item is not clickable. And if you look at these items in the middle, they don't look like buttons. We've clearly got a navigation up here. It looks like a banner in the middle of the screen, so you don't think at first glance that these are clickable. And it actually took me quite a while to figure out that, in fact, these are the menus and the main menus that you would want to use when you go to this site. And so these are, in fact, clickable items. Very, very confusing. All right, so sometimes you can't make things self-evident. And when you can't make it self-evident, then you need to make it self-explanatory. Right? So you need to use some kind of visual cue to let them know what it is. Right? So we can do this by using appearance. Right? So we can change the size, the color, the layout, the way we did with that button, so that you knew the word button was a button. Well-chosen names can help too, especially if you're using common navigation names, common e-commerce names, right? That can help them figure out what an item is. And if need be, you can also use very small amounts of carefully crafted text placed in the right place so that they know what it is and what they need to do. All right, so let's come back here and show you. So we went back to this open table. In addition to making it easy to navigate around it, we also see that they use some signifiers. So for example, in this place where they've got the two people, the date and the time, it's actually got this little downward arrow, which it's actually an affordance as well, right? Because the affords clicking on, going down, moving down. And so when you click on this, you can then see if a drop down or there's 3 people, 4 people, you can change the number of people. same with the date, same with the time. And so this little piece of information added the explanation that this block here was not just static text, but was in fact a drop-down menu, right? Which is something we didn't have in that other website. Let's see if I can navigate back. Right, in this site here, if this had had a little downward arrow next to these menus, we would know that these were in fact drop-down menus. Right, so that little bit of self-explanation. Here in the search, right, they had the search symbol and they could have left it there, or they could have left it with just the search symbol and the word search, but they added a little bit of extra small amount of carefully crafted text to let you know what types of things you should be adding into that search field. All right, so you can spend a lot of time working on our site to make sure that our names and our interaction items are self-evident, or at least self-explanatory, but why bother? In essence, making your web page and any product self-evident is like good lighting in a store, right? It makes everything in the store seem better. And when the navigation items and the visual cues on your site are self-evident, it makes your whole site seem better. It makes your whole site seem more professional. It makes the content and substance of your site seem better. The most important thing to me, I think, is that the self-evident sites and products are effortless to use. Right? It's not work for the user to go in and use your site. I know a lot of our Air Force systems, it really is an arduous task to go in and use them because they're not well designed. Whereas some of the other sites in the commercial industry that are very well designed, it's such a fluid, natural mechanism to go through and to go through the process of doing something, like buying a book on Amazon, that you want to do it again, and you don't consider it a big chore, and you don't dread doing it, you don't try to avoid it, but if you need to do it, you just go in and do it. And that makes you want to come back to the site if it's not a lot of work to use the site. And sites and products that make us think, they consume our energy, they consume our enthusiasm, and they consume our time. And by the time you're done using one of those sites, you feel drained, you feel exhausted, you may feel frustrated, right? And that's going to make you not want to come back. All right, so in conclusion, we went over Krug's first law of usability, which is don't make me think. The big principle is to keep your content self-evident, or at least self-explanatory. You want to pay special attention to your names, your interaction items, and the appearance of those interaction items, and the names as well. So, and I really believe that these principles are true for all system designs and not just websites, right? So any computerized system that involves human interaction should have clear, self-evident names, interaction items that you can clearly interact with, and signifiers using appearance to let you know what you should do.